The wedding was alive, buzzing with laughter, music, and smiles. But then, as if swept in by a storm, the doors flung open, and there she was, Lisa the bride, but not as anyone expected. Her dress wasn't the pure white everyone imagined. Instead, she stood there in a midnight black gown, wobbling slightly, and the sharp scent of alcohol clung to her like a shadow. The crowd fell silent, their whispers barely hidden. Eyes darted from her to John, who stood at the altar, his face a picture of shock and heartbreak. He searched her face, his voice barely holding together. "Lisa, why? Why are you dressed like this? And why are you drunk?" She looked at him, her gaze cold, defiant. "John," she said, her voice steady, "this ceremony. You, me, this wedding. It's all a joke." The guests drew in a collective breath, stunned. John's face crumbled, but he took a shaky step toward her. "Lisa, don't. Please. We can talk about this." But Lisa wasn't finished. Her expression hardened as she muttered, almost to herself, "Why are we even doing this? Marriage, love. None of it matters." Her friend Jessica, worried and watching from the pews, quickly moved to her side, guiding her away from John. They spoke in hushed tones, Jessica's face full of concern while Lisa's remained a mix of bitterness and pain. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lisa returned to John, her dark dress still striking against the white flowers and glowing candles around them. She insisted on keeping it, and the ceremony moved forward, but the warmth was gone. Even the pastor's voice had a tinge of sadness as he continued, trying to steady the shaken crowd. John stood beside her, barely holding himself together. The love he felt for Lisa was clear in his eyes, but his heart seemed heavy. He knew she didn't feel the same, had known for some time. But he held on to hope that one day, maybe, her heart would soften toward him. As for Lisa, the weight of her choice seemed to hang around her, suffocating yet familiar. Love wasn't why she was here. Survival was. Marriage would shield her from whispers and avoid the shame she feared as a single mother. And John, kind and loyal, was the easiest path to that future. When it came time for the vows, Lisa's hands shook slightly. She looked at John, who gazed back with desperate, pleading eyes, clinging to this moment as if it might be the one that finally brought them together. The pastor's voice filled the room, echoing, "Do you, Lisa, take John to be your lawfully wedded husband, to love and to cherish, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" She paused, a slight tremor passing over her face. The words felt empty, hollow. She knew she couldn't love him, but the weight of everyone's stares pressed down on her. With barely a whisper, she murmured, "I do." The guests seemed to exhale as one, relief spreading through the room. John's face softened into a weak smile, though his eyes held a sadness that couldn't be hidden. Deep down, he knew that love should be more than this, but he clung to the hope that somehow, marriage would be enough, that someday, she would feel the way he did. When it came time for the kiss, Lisa turned her head slightly, letting John place a quick, awkward kiss on her cheek instead of her lips. The crowd watched, noticing the uneasy distance, sensing the cracks in the foundation they were building together. After the big, empty wedding ceremony, Lisa and John stepped into their new home, moving quietly like two strangers bound together only by duty. John's eyes lingered on Lisa, searching, hoping for a sign, a spark, something to bridge the distance between them. But Lisa didn't look back. She strode straight to the bedroom, her steps steady and unfeeling. Inside, Lisa lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, her face void of warmth. She was ready to fulfill her role as a wife, but there was no tenderness in her gaze. Her mind was on one thing: children. She would love them deeply, she thought. But love for John, that was never part of her plan. John sat on the edge of the bed, his heart sinking. He had known from the start that her feelings for him were hollow, but seeing her lie there, so cold, drove the point deeper. "Lisa, we don't have to rush into anything," he whispered gently. "Let's just be okay. Let's take our time." Lisa turned to him, her face flushed from too much wine. "What use are you to me if not to give me children?" she snapped. "You wanted a wife, John. Now you have one. I want children, so let's get this done with." Her voice was sharp, her words laced with bitterness. A painful tightness formed in John's chest. He had dreamed of building a life together, even knowing her lack of affection. But this was unbearable. You deserve better than this, Lisa. And so do I, he said softly, the sorrow weighing heavily in his words. Lisa's eyes flashed with anger. So, you're saying you won't do your duty? If that's the case, I'll find someone else to give me children. You can raise them if you like, or not. Your choice. John sat in silence, knowing she wouldn't yield. Finally, he agreed, though it felt like an obligation, not a union. Afterward, Lisa turned away, drifting off to sleep without a glance, leaving John alone in the silence, his heart heavy and bruised. That night stretched endlessly, John lying awake, staring into the darkness. He was exhausted, yet he couldn't stop thinking. Could he ever reach her heart? Hours passed, and eventually, he fell into a restless sleep. The sudden shock of icy water jolted John awake. He opened his eyes, blinking against the water dripping from his hair, to see Lisa standing over him, an empty bucket in her hand, her face hard and unforgiving. Lisa, he choked out, wiping the water from his face. What are you doing? Her eyes narrowed. You were snoring like a pig, she spat, her voice filled with contempt. I can't sleep next to that. Take your things and find somewhere else to sleep. Drenched and disheartened, John gathered his things, retreating to the cold comfort of the living room. The next morning, he hurried to his meeting but realized halfway there that he had left an important file at home. Desperately, he called Lisa, but she ignored his calls. Frustrated, he finally reached out to her friend Jessica, who casually informed him Lisa was at the salon. John arrived at the salon, his face a mask of frustration, and found Lisa laughing, carefree, as if nothing had happened. Without a word, he took the keys, hurried home, and barely made it back in time for his presentation. Later he returned home, drained, only to find Lisa on the couch, scrolling through her phone, indifferent. He sat beside her, gathering his resolve. Lisa, we need to talk, he said, his tone steady but serious. Without looking up, she replied coldly, What now? This isn't working, he said, his voice filled with quiet frustration. I've given you everything, but it's clear you don't want this marriage. Lisa shrugged, her eyes still glued to her phone. I told you, all I want is children. You can do whatever you want after that. I won't stop you. John's heart cracked, her indifference biting deeper than he could bear. Is that all I am to you, Lisa? Just a means to an end. Her gaze flicked up briefly, bored. You knew this from the beginning, John. I never promised you love. The weight of her words hit him, each one cold and unyielding. He had clung to the hope that maybe, with time, she would see him, really see him. But now, he saw it all too clearly. Lisa's heart was unreachable. I can't do this anymore, he murmured. I deserve more than being just a shadow in my own marriage. Lisa looked up, her face emotionless. Then leave, she said simply. If you can't handle it, just go. Her words were like a slap, leaving him reeling. Hurt, John grabbed his car keys, and just as he reached the door, he heard a soft moan from behind. Turning, he saw Lisa doubled over, clutching her stomach, her face twisted in pain. He rushed back to her side. Lisa! What's wrong? My stomach, she whispered, her voice trembling. Without hesitation, John scooped her up and rushed to the hospital. After an examination, the doctor delivered the news. She was 6 weeks pregnant. But it was a high-risk pregnancy, and her recent stress and drinking had put the baby in jeopardy. She needed close monitoring, or she could lose the child. John sat by her bedside, stunned. The reality of a child, his child, beginning to grow, despite the cold walls surrounding their marriage, was almost too much to comprehend. He gently held her hand, his voice soft. Lisa, did you know? She nodded faintly, not looking at him. Yes. That's why I wanted children so badly. John's heart felt like lead. Even now, the pregnancy wasn't about them, about creating something together. It was just another step in her plan. Lisa, please. You need to take care of yourself, he said, his voice barely a whisper. This is our child. I want you to be healthy. For the first time, Lisa's gaze met his, but her eyes remained distant. I don't care, she said, her voice flat. I only care about having this baby. You and I. This changes nothing. Her words fell like stones between them. Over the course of many days, Lisa lay in a hospital bed, quiet and withdrawn. John visited her every day, his steps echoing softly in the sterile hallway as he approached her room. His hands were always full. One day, he'd have her favorite flowers. Another day, he'd bring her a warm meal from her favorite restaurant. But no matter what he offered, her face remained blank, her eyes distant. She would barely look at him. One afternoon, as he stood in the hallway, worn and heavy-hearted, Jessica spotted him. She didn't need to ask. The pain in his eyes told her everything. Jessica had known Lisa for years, considered her a sister, but she couldn't understand her friend's coldness towards John, a man who was everything a person could hope for, kind, thoughtful, and endlessly patient. She watched him slowly sink under the weight of rejection, and it broke her heart. Jessica sat beside him in the waiting room, her hand gently resting on his. "John," she murmured softly, her voice full of compassion. He looked away, struggling to keep his composure. "I've done everything I know," he whispered, his voice heavy with pain. "She doesn't care. Not even for our baby. What else can I do?" Jessica listened, her heart aching for him. She suggested they go somewhere to talk, somewhere less cold than the hospital. They found a quiet bar, and over a drink, John opened up, pouring out everything he'd been holding in. She listened intently, feeling each word, each sigh of frustration and heartbreak. She could see the depth of his love for Lisa, but she also saw how empty it left him. The next morning, Jessica visited Lisa in her hospital room, hoping to reach her. "Lisa," she began, trying to keep her tone steady, "John loves you. He's here every single day, trying to make you smile. Why do you shut him out?" Lisa barely glanced at her. "I don't care, Jessica," she said dismissively. "All I wanted was to have his child. Now that I'm pregnant, he can do whatever he likes." Jessica felt a surge of anger. "How can you be so unfeeling? This man would do anything for you, and all you give him is coldness. Don't you see how much he's hurting?" Lisa's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. "If you care so much, why don't you be the one to love him, Jessica?" The word stung, leaving Jessica speechless. She'd always hoped that, deep down, her friend might come to love John. But now, she realized just how closed Lisa's heart had become. Taking a steady breath, Jessica replied, "One day, Lisa, you'll regret this. You're pushing away a good man, and he deserves better." With that, she left the room, her heart heavy with disappointment. Outside, John waited, watching her approach with a hint of hope. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "John, she's still distant," she said quietly, trying to soften the blow. "She doesn't care if she loses you. She even suggested that I should love you if I care so much." John's face fell, his shoulders slumping. He took in her words, stunned. "I never thought she'd say something like that," he murmured, pain thick in his voice. Tears slipped down his cheeks as Jessica moved closer, pulling him into a comforting hug. In the days that followed, Jessica checked on John often. She'd drop by his home to tidy up, sometimes bringing him a meal. Slowly, a quiet friendship blossomed, bringing small moments of comfort in his storm. Weeks passed. John still visited Lisa, though she barely acknowledged him. Jessica stayed away from the hospital, uncertain of how to face Lisa after their last conversation. One evening, as Lisa lay alone, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her sister. Curiously, she opened it, finding a photo, a snapshot of Jessica and John, their hands entwined, walking side by side into a mall. She didn't love John, at least, she'd told herself that countless times. He was there for a purpose, a provider for her children, nothing more. She'd been firm with him, made her intentions clear. Yet the thought of Jessica, her best friend, being with him pricked at her insides, filling her with a strange unease she couldn't shake. She remembered, with an odd pang, a conversation she'd had with Jessica long ago, almost a joke. "If you like him so much," Lisa had laughed, "go ahead and love him." But now, the reality of that statement hit her in ways she never expected. The next day, John arrived, like he did every day, carrying a small bouquet of flowers and a warm meal he'd made himself. His face looked worn, faint shadows under his eyes, but his gaze was gentle as he set the flowers on her bedside table. "How are you feeling today?" he asked softly, his voice laced with concern. Lisa barely glanced at him, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Fine," she muttered, the word clipped and hollow. John shifted uncomfortably, sensing her distant mood. "Is something wrong?" he asked, his brows knitting together with worry. She forced a laugh, though it was bitter and mirthless. "Wrong? Of course, something's wrong. I'm lying here in this hospital, carrying your child, while you're out with Jessica, looking like the perfect couple." Her voice held a sharp edge, each word a dagger she hurled his way. John's face fell, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Jessica? Lisa, she's been helping me through this, nothing more. I don't understand. Where is this coming from?" Lisa met his gaze at last, her eyes hard and accusing. "I saw the picture. You two, smiling, holding hands. So tell me, is that what you wanted? To replace me with her?" For a moment, John was silent, absorbing the sting of her words. He looked away, a shadow of sadness crossing his face. "Lisa," he said quietly, "I tried. I wanted more from us, something real. But you kept shutting me out, making it clear I was only here to give you children. I'm not a piece of machinery, Lisa. I have feelings too." Lisa's jaw tightened, her pride refusing to let her show the sting she felt. "I told you from the beginning, John. I didn't need love. I needed children. You were the one who thought love would magically happen." Her voice was cold, dismissive, but the ache in her chest grew sharper with every word she spoke. John shook his head, a weary sigh escaping him. "I did love you, Lisa. I still do. But love needs a place to grow, and here, it's always been smothered. Maybe it's time we both let go. I'll be there for our child, always. But I deserve a chance at happiness too." As he spoke, Lisa felt something crack inside her, a weight pressing down on her chest. She wanted to argue, to throw his words back at him, but all that came was silence, her throat tight with emotions she didn't want to feel. As John turned to leave, his mind wandered back to when he first met her, back in university. Lisa had been so different. Kind, bright, a beacon of warmth that drew him in. He remembered her helping him with statistics, patiently explaining concepts, her smile lighting up the library as she guided him through his struggles. She hadn't cared that she had her own exams. She'd stayed up late, ensuring he understood. She had been generous, selfless then, a quality that had captivated him. But that person felt like a distant memory now. The Lisa lying in the hospital bed, her face set in stone, seemed unreachable, almost a stranger. And as he walked out of the room, he felt as if he were walking away from something precious he'd lost a long time ago. The air was thick with silence as Lisa lay in her hospital bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. Her mind wandered, filling with questions she had pushed away for so long. Thoughts of John, their life, and the love that had slipped through her fingers haunted her. She wondered if he would leave her completely and start a life with Jessica. The mere idea sent a pang through her heart. She had always wanted this child, her beautiful baby girl. Yet now, she felt the loneliness of it all, an emptiness that her daughter's sweet little face couldn't fill entirely. Meanwhile, John left the hospital with a heavy heart. He walked slowly, hands deep in his pockets, lost in memories. Memories of their younger days, back when Lisa was vibrant, kind, and full of hope. She had been a light to everyone around her, compassionate and driven. He had loved her deeply, but now, she was a stranger, cold and distant. He couldn't help but wonder what had gone so wrong. Days turned into weeks, and John, though no longer living with Lisa, visited often to see his daughter. Each visit was brief, his words few, his gaze distant. He looked at his daughter with warmth, but when his eyes fell on Lisa, there was only an emptiness, a shadow of the man who once adored her. Lisa noticed this, and it gnawed at her. One quiet evening, after putting her daughter to bed, Lisa sat by the window, the moonlight casting a soft glow on her face. She let her mind wander to her wedding day, the day she had walked down the aisle in a black dress, defiant and determined. She had been so sure of herself back then, certain she didn't need love. She had thought that having a child would complete her, that it was all she needed to feel fulfilled. But now, looking back, she wondered if she had been wrong all along. The sound of a knock pulled her from her thoughts. John stepped into the room with a soft smile, but his eyes stayed guarded. She wanted to hold on to that moment, to find something to say that could bridge the distance between them. "Hey," he greeted, stepping aside. "How's she doing?" "She's fine," Lisa replied, trying to smile. "Sleeping now." They stood there, the silence stretching between them. Finally, John broke it. "I'm glad she's healthy. You're doing a great job with her." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. She wanted to say more, but the words caught in her throat. Just as John was about to turn away, she spoke up, her voice trembling. "John, wait." He paused, looking at her with a hint of surprise. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she managed, the weight of her regrets filling her voice. "For everything. For pushing you away, for not seeing what you were offering. I was so focused on what I thought I needed, and I didn't realize what I already had." He looked at her, his gaze softening as he listened. "Lisa," he said quietly, "I don't blame you for how things turned out. We both wanted different things. I wanted a life with you, but I understand now that you needed something else." Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "I thought I didn't need love. But now, I don't know how to live without it." John sighed deeply, moving closer. He reached out, as if wanting to comfort her but stopped himself. "Lisa, I cared for you deeply. I still do, but we can't undo the past. We have our daughter now, and she deserves our best." As he spoke, Lisa realized he was right. She needed to let go of the what-ifs, to heal and be the mother her daughter deserved. She gave him a nod, the tears streaming down her face. As he turned to go, she sat by the window again, watching him walk down the hallway, her heart aching with the weight of her choices. In the stillness of the night, she held her daughter close, her silent promise to give her child all the love she once thought she didn't need. She had been wrong, but now, as the days passed, she found a new purpose, a promise to be the best mother she could be. And perhaps one day that would be enough. Days turned into weeks, and Lisa sat alone in her quiet house, her mind heavy with memories. Each evening, she glanced at her phone, hoping for a message from John. But there was only silence. One night, while tucking her little girl into bed, a soft knock broke the silence. She froze, her heart thudding. Slowly, she walked to the door and opened it to see John, standing there. His face was calm, serious, but his eyes were gentle. "Can we talk?" he asked in a low voice. Lisa nodded, stepping aside to let him in. They sat together in the living room. The air between them felt thick, charged with words unsaid and emotions unspoken. John looked down, his voice soft. "I got your message," he began. "I've thought about it a lot." Lisa swallowed, her hands clenching slightly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, John. For everything. I was so blind. I pushed you away. But I miss you. I don't know how to make this right." John looked at her, his eyes searching. "I have one question, Lisa," he said, his voice steady but filled with pain. "Why did you treat me like that? What did I ever do to you?" Lisa's gaze fell, and suddenly, her eyes filled with tears. She began softly, her voice trembling. "It was never you, John. It was me. I couldn't trust love. I couldn't. Because of something that happened a long time ago." He frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Taking a shaky breath, Lisa spoke, each word carrying years of pain. "I loved once. His name was Mark. I thought he was everything. My soulmate. I was young, and I believed in fairy tales. But my mother, she didn't. She thought he wasn't good enough for me. And Isabel, my sister, she was jealous." John listened, his face changing as he heard the story he never knew. Lisa wiped away her tears, her voice tight with old anger. "They betrayed me," she whispered. "My mother convinced Isabel to take him from me, to prove he wasn't right for me. And Mark, he fell for it. One day, I found him in Isabel's room. The look in his eyes when he saw me. I'll never forget it." John's face fell, his own heart aching as he imagined her pain. "Lisa, I remember my mother standing there, watching as if she'd taught me some life lesson. She said, 'This is what happens when you give your heart to someone not worthy. She wanted me to see love as a weakness, to never trust it again. Lisa's face twisted in pain as fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. So I shut myself off. I thought if I kept love out, no one could hurt me again. John reached out, taking her hand gently. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of Lisa's past hanging in the air. But in that quiet, a small spark of hope began to grow. John sat in silence, staring at the ground, his thoughts heavy and full. The room felt cold and still, the kind of stillness that only heartache could bring. He slowly lifted his gaze, meeting Lisa's eyes, which were full of regret. He let out a deep sigh. "Lisa," he said gently, his voice soft as though he were afraid of breaking her further. "I had no idea. I'm sorry. So sorry you went through all that. You didn't deserve it. And you never told me." Lisa looked away, her hands twisting together. She swallowed hard. "How could I?" she said quietly. I thought you'd see me as weak, maybe even broken. And now, I realize. I pushed you away, the one person who truly cared." John's eyes clouded as he took a shaky breath, pacing slowly across the room. "You didn't just push me away, Lisa. You shut me out completely. I tried over and over to show you I wasn't like him. But you kept me at arm's length." She bit her lip, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, John. I wish I could go back." John stopped pacing, facing her. His voice, though soft, held a firmness. "Lisa, I loved you with everything I had. I wanted a future, a life with you. But you never gave us a chance." Lisa's shoulders slumped, her head hanging low. "I know," she said, her voice cracking under the weight of her guilt. "I didn't know how to trust again." John's face softened, the pain clear in his eyes. "I understand why you did what you did, Lisa, but it doesn't erase the fact that you broke us." Lisa's heart sank, and her hands trembled as she wiped away a tear. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know it's too late. I just needed you to know." She let out a quiet sob, and her shoulders shook. John couldn't bear to watch her crumble. He stepped forward, wrapping his arms around her tightly. She melted into his embrace, her tears falling freely, and he whispered, "I love you, Lisa. I've never loved anyone else, and I never will." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and filled with emotion. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice shaking. "After all I put you through?" John gently placed his hands on her cheeks, wiping away a tear. "Because I've never given up hope, Lisa. Even when you pushed me away, I saw the pain in your eyes. I knew there was more, something you were hiding." Lisa closed her eyes, overwhelmed by his love, feeling unworthy. "But I don't deserve you, John," she whispered. "I've been so cold." John shook his head, holding her face close. "I don't want anyone else. I want you. We can work through this together." Lisa's lips trembled, and she struggled to find her voice. I don't know how, John. I'm scared." He gave her a small, comforting smile. "We'll figure it out. We have a daughter now, and she deserves a home filled with love. I believe you can love, Lisa. If you'll let yourself try." They held each other in silence, feeling a small sliver of hope. But then, there was a soft knock on the door, pulling them back to the present. John rushed to the door, heart pounding, curiosity prickling his mind. As he opened it, he froze, his breath caught. There stood a woman he hadn't seen in ages, someone he'd intentionally kept his distance from. She stepped closer, her voice harsh but pleading. "Let me in." Her demand rang through the quiet, grabbing the attention of Lisa, who came hurrying over, her brows furrowing as she took in the scene. Lisa reached the doorway, her face tightening at the sight of the woman, who suddenly sank to her knees, looking up at Lisa with eyes full of desperation. "Please, forgive me," she whispered, voice shaking. Lisa's face stayed hard, her mouth a firm line, and without a word, she turned away, stepping back into the house. John blinked, taken aback, his mind racing. "Wait, you know each other?" he asked, eyes darting between the two women, confusion etched on his face. The woman's shoulders slumped as she finally admitted, "I'm Isabel, Lisa's sister." The words hit the room like a stone dropped in water, sending ripples of shock through everyone. Lisa's eyes widened, and John felt his stomach twist, realizing the depth of what this meant. Isabel slowly made her way into the house, her voice small yet persistent. "Please, forgive me." Lisa stood rooted to the spot, her face betraying a storm of emotions: hurt, anger, disbelief. Memories flashed before her eyes. She saw Isabel's attempts to sabotage her relationship, saw how she'd almost succeeded in destroying her happiness. Pain and resentment bubbled up, pressing against her heart. Lisa's voice shook with restrained anger as she asked, "Why? After everything, was it not enough for you?" Isabel's face fell, and she looked down, barely able to speak. I was jealous, Lisa. I thought no one could be trusted, that John would end up betraying you. I wanted to show you, but I was wrong. So wrong. I see now that John's different." A bitter laugh escaped Lisa's lips as she shook her head. "Do you realize what you've done? You almost took away the one person who has loved me for who I am," she said, glancing at John, her voice raw. "He's been here, steady and patient, hoping I'd learn to love him back. And you," she choked on her words, fighting back tears. Isabel's face crumpled, her regret visible in the way she shrank under Lisa's gaze. "Please, Lisa. I know I've hurt you deeply, but I want to make it right. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance." John, silent until now, finally stepped forward, his voice gentle yet firm. "Lisa, I can't tell you what to feel. But maybe this is a chance to let go. We have a future to build together. A family. Our daughter needs us, and we need to move forward. For her." Lisa's hard gaze softened, her shoulders relaxing just a bit as she looked from John to Isabel, the weight of betrayal and the hope of forgiveness warring in her heart. She took a step toward Isabel, her voice breaking. "If you're truly sorry, I'll forgive you. But trust that will take time." Isabel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Lisa. I swear, I'll prove to you that I've changed." As Isabel left, Lisa turned to John, her eyes heavy with gratitude mixed with lingering pain. "I'm not sure I can fully let go just yet," she whispered, "but I want to try. I want us to heal and find real happiness together." John wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "One step at a time," he murmured, comforting her as they stood, holding each other tightly. The next day, they visited Jessica, their friend who had played a role in their reconciliation. Together, they shared their thanks and embraced the fresh start they'd been given. And from that day forward, Lisa and John cherished every moment, living with love, trust, and a newfound understanding that they'd earned together. This story teaches us that love cannot be forced. It must be based on mutual care and understanding, not convenience or societal pressure. Before making major life decisions, ensure that love is reciprocated to prevent heartbreak. Unresolved emotional wounds can harm future relationships, so it's essential to confront past pain before committing to someone new. Effective communication is vital to prevent misunderstandings. Finally, forgiveness is crucial. Holding on to hurt only brings more damage to our lives. If this story touched your heart and you're eager for more uplifting and inspiring tales, please like this video and subscribe to my channel and let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Let's continue to discover stories that showcase the incredible strength of the human spirit and the many blessings life has to offer. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the next video. Stay positive and keep believing in the beauty of life.